At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
You're listening to the Retro Mo Podcast. I'm your host, Mo, and I love to play and review old video games and a few new games too. If you prefer to read instead of listen, check out my written reviews at retromo.substack.com. In this episode, I'll be sharing my experience with Final Fantasy X for the PlayStation 2, released in 2001. I've scored this game 9 out of 10. An amazing game. A highly regarded entry that brought a lot of firsts for the series. For many, Final Fantasy X is the capstone of the series. Even though Final Fantasy X brought a lot of firsts for the series, in many ways it was also the last of the classic Final Fantasy JRPGs. It was Yoshinori Kitase's last game as director. He also directed Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, and so the series diverted significantly in style and gameplay after Final Fantasy X. One of the major changes that Final Fantasy X brought to the series was the introduction of voice acting. Sadly, some poor voice direction, forcing the English actors to match unnatural lip movements in particular, led to several awkward performances. The iconic Tidus laughing scene has become immortalized in the annals of meme history. Honestly, for the time, most of the voice acting was fine. It brought a huge leap forward for the series, and we should recognize that. Final Fantasy X takes a break from the well-worn but beloved active time battle system and brings back turn-based combat. The unique conditional turn-based battle system features a dynamic turn order, which allows for lots of strategic planning. Party members can swap in and out on the fly, so you can exploit enemy weaknesses or protect vulnerable characters. The unique sphere grid provides tons of character customization options. Blitzball is either the best or the worst Final Fantasy minigame, depending on who you ask. It didn't grab me quite like Triple Triad did in Final Fantasy VIII, but there's so much depth and complexity to Blitzball, the term minigame almost feels like a misnomer. Back in the day, many of my fellow RPG nerd friends spent hours upon hours playing Blitzball, and they loved it. The visuals are quite impressive for a PS2 game. Some pre-rendered backgrounds were still utilized, but most of the game was built in full 3D. The cinematics were some of the best of the era, just absolutely jaw-dropping to behold in the early 2000s. Final Fantasy X was unlike anything seen before in the mainstream market. The game's design incorporated a fusion of South Pacific, Thai, and Japanese iconography, and Tetsuya Nomura's character designs were some of the most complex we'd seen yet. Final Fantasy X was Nobuo Uematsu's last soundtrack as lead composer in the series, and it is easily one of his best. I could list over a dozen phenomenal tracks, but some of my favorites include Xanarkand, Tidus' theme, The Blitzers, and A Fleeting Dream, just to name a few. Final Fantasy X is also a breakout moment for Masashi Hamauzu, another one of my favorite video game music composers. Check out his tracks, The Splendid Performance, Wandering, and Servants of the Mountain. Again, depending on who you ask, the story is either amazing or terrible. I thought the story was solid. In spite of some awkward voice acting performances, the characters are very memorable and engaging. Some of the major plot twists at the end had me on the edge of my seat. I really enjoyed my ride through Final Fantasy X. It's one of the big three classic Final Fantasy games that most fans of the series recommend: Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VII, and Final Fantasy X. If you're a fan of retro RPGs, give Final Fantasy X a shot. Thanks for listening to the Retro Mo podcast. As always, I do my best to keep all of my content spoiler-free and rated E for everyone. If you find this podcast enjoyable or helpful, tell a friend and consider giving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. If you have questions or comments, you can send an email to retromopodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Godspeed.